G'day everyone, it's Michelle J. Raymond back again for another episode of the podcast where this week, listeners, I'm bringing in a guest who is not just an expert, but actually has to do this day by day in amongst it at WD. Welcome to the show, Melissa Dawson.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Look, today I am going to pick your brain, and I'm allowed to do that because we're on the podcast, and we're going to be talking about the secrets behind high-performing corporate social on LinkedIn. Now, that might be a bit of a mouthful, but I think it's really important that we look at things that you found that make campaigns successful, what businesses can do to support the social team, and ultimately get some practical tips and strategies. All right, Melissa, here we go. My first question is this. I'm talking about high performing corporate social, but how would you define that? What does it actually mean in a business when we say high performing LinkedIn, for instance? How do you measure it as well?
It can be very different for every brand. High performing social can look different depending on where you are. I've worked with consumer brands. I've also worked and currently work more on the B2B side. For consumer brands, that can look like how many people did you reach with your video? Did it go viral? For B2B businesses, however, the customer life cycle looks pretty different and does require a different strategy. We hear a lot about B2C social, but not as much about the B2B side. And for a while, B2B social looked more like lead generation as really being the number one way to drive and measure success on social specifically. But we're actually seeing a different approach lately for B2B social specifically. I'm really starting to see brands using a combination of storytelling, community building, and driving value for their audience as these key drivers for B2B social. So what high performing means to different ones depends, but really I'm starting to see B2B brands starting to incorporate more of what you kind of see on the B2C side, how they develop their strategy and how they measure that success. From a personal standpoint, for my company specifically, our corporate social strategy really is focused on targeting really specific groups with key messages about WD. We're not really on the lead gen side of things. We're really focused on more of an awareness play, more engagement. And these are kind of metrics you tend to see more on the B2C side, but we are incorporating that more from a corporate lens because of the goals that we currently have and trying to target these groups. And by groups, I mean your big hyperscalers and data center companies, AI companies, but then we're also targeting investors and analysts and targeting them more with a message than with an action. Because we're targeting those groups, we're not just necessarily looking at the metrics for social, like your traditional awareness, reach, engagements, but there's some more intangible, qualitative things like news coverage and analyst coverage and stock growth are all played into how we measure our success with our B2B social program.
I love that you've shared those intangible things because I often think it's so unfair for marketers. And I spent my career in B2B sales. So I am asking these questions and coming from it now as an outsider looking in, going, marketers get measured on, yes, leads and impressions and all of those things that we can see, but brand seems to be a lot more, as you said, intangible, more difficult to often measure. And yet we're still telling marketers we're measuring you on these old school KPIs and your success is determined by those, knowing full well that you'll get better outcomes focusing on brand long term. And so I find that it's it must feel like a tug of war internally some days if you're not working for a brand that recognizes that not everything can be so easily measured. Is that what it's really like, a day in the life of a corporate social media manager like yourself?
Yes, absolutely. And I will say it's been a lot better for my current situation, getting full support from my supervisor and from my VP and so on, that they do see the value of social and they do see the value of those intangible intangible ways of measuring success. Whereas in the past, I have definitely found challenges in demonstrating the value of social because it is so intangible, because it's more about that driving connections, driving engagement and awareness and all of those. How can you measure how entertained people were by your content? How can you really measure how much somebody saw something and enjoyed it when they didn't engage with it? There are plenty of people who consume social content in that way without actually engaging. So being able to show that there's other ways of measuring that success is really important for being able to tell that story that you're driving value for the business.
I have no doubt that we have so many of the listeners working in marketing that are nodding and cheering you on, going, yes, this is what it's really like for me. A day in the life of a marketer. I hope you feel seen, listeners, because this is something that comes up in so many conversations with the businesses that I'm working with, especially in B2B, because I still think that this is pretty new in the world of B2B, even though B2B has been around since the beginning of time, but doing things differently and trying new things and experimenting, I think comes with some growing pains. And that's why I wanted to talk to you today around, let's take a look at some of the campaigns that you've been involved in that worked really well. What do you think was different behind the scenes compared to those that were kind of average or maybe flopped?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been involved in a lot of campaigns over the years. To me, it comes down to, and this is going to be a bit of a departure maybe for a person who's worked in media and social media, but it really ultimately, no matter what platform or what medium you're using, the creative is the most important piece. And the creative dictates the rest of it. The creative being the message. Was it impactful? Does the message land? Does it make sense to your specific audience and your target audience? And then like when we're thinking more specifically about social media and it's the part it plays in these campaigns, it's important to think about not just creating creative for a campaign without thinking about where it's going to go. So a campaign piece of creative that goes on LinkedIn needs to look different from how it's going to look on if you're running a 30-second spot somewhere, or essentially, does that piece of creative make sense and is it native to the platform that it's being posted on? So from a social perspective, this really means that the person who is managing the campaign at a high level really needs to make sure they're pulling in the social media person from the beginning stages of determining that strategy, so that each piece of that creative will make sense for the platforms that they're being shared on. And sometimes that means not sharing on all platforms at your disposal. Sometimes that means not using that creative on social at all. I know that sounds wild coming from a social media person, but sometimes a campaign doesn't make sense on social media. Or it can mean only using social media for that campaign. So I think a campaign manager or marketing manager's role is to collaborate closely with your social media person and anybody else who's kind of in charge of like these tactics, and coordinate a strategy around that message that you're really trying to get across. I think marketing teams fail when they think they need every campaign to be shared across every channel that they have. Ultimately, the best campaigns I've seen that I've worked on really have a clear strategy from the beginning. They've involved everybody from the very beginning of the campaign, with the creative leading the way. The creative or the message is really the crux of the strategy. And then you let the tactics follow, and you let the people who are the experts in each of those tactics help develop that strategy.
Look, I am just sitting here smiling, and I know it's like the next question that I wanted to get to with you on this one, but I know when I'm dealing with marketers and social teams is that one of their biggest frustrations, and I reckon it's got to be in the top three, if not the top one, is the fact that people come up to them and drop something figuratively or literally on them and say, we've got this going out. You've got to post it on social today. Like, what's the real cost to the business when people don't bring social in early enough? And how can teams really, if they were to get in early, what's the bonuses that come with, getting in early?
Yes, I would say that most social media managers would agree with me on that. This is probably one of our biggest pet peeves is
Come on,
that
it's top one, isn't it?
it's probably, yeah, top one, that and like make it go viral or
Make it go
um,
viral. Okay, you're right. Maybe that's the top one.
actually recently I had a post on LinkedIn asking people to rage bait me as a social media manager, and make it go viral was probably the number one comment. But this one's a big one too. A marketing manager or someone leading the marketing campaigns is developing either a campaign, or there's maybe a one-off like flyer for an event or something like that is being used on another platform or another medium, and they say, hey, can you just post this on social? That's one of our biggest pet peeves. It's not just because we want to know. It can be honestly seen as potentially disrespectful even to social media managers. That might be, I don't know, a hot take, but not seeing us as beyond the tactic of what we're doing, but seeing us as a strategic partner. And it leads to poor results ultimately. And that's the crux here, like, is that you're going to get two issues that come out of this. One, if you give the social media manager finalized creative and they had no part in it and they had no ability to say, well, here's how it should have been done and here's the best practices, and you just tell them to post it, it's just not going to perform very well. So your goals are not being met, right? From your perspective, and you're going to lose out on your initiative success. Two, it's also going to negatively impact your social media manager or your social media team's metrics, and it could reflect poorly on the brand. And in addition to that, it could impact the brand algorithmically. So if you are regularly posting content that is just not driving results, the platform that you're posting on may punish you for that. And you have to be consistently posting good content for these platforms to reward you the way you want to be rewarded and show up in people's feeds. My biggest advice with all of that is really to pull your social media manager in as early as possible. If you have any inclination that social media will be part of your campaign, it benefits you, it benefits your social media manager, and it benefits the company.
There's so much upside. Can I share my pet peeve example of how this plays out? What drives me bananas? And I work with companies to do company page management. So often I'm the person managing their socials for them. And the thing that drives me crazy, someone's gone and spent 30,000, 100,000, couple of $100,000 to have a trade show booth somewhere in the world. And the whole team's going. And then the day before, someone comes to me and says, can you please do a post that will be at stand H1 in this booth? Come and see us. And I want to cry because I know that it is going to, number one, no one cares. Your whole industry is posting exactly the same thing at the same time. But even more so, if you had planned and organized with the social team in advance, you could give the visitors to that trade show 6 weeks notice of all the reasons that they should come and visit the team. What faces will be there? What are you showing off? What's new? Give them a reason to come and see you at that trade show, because nobody cares about your booth number, no matter how much money you have spent. Now, I've got that off my chest, but can you relate to that one, Melissa?
Yes. I was just about to say that because of that very same thing, I have made sure to explain to the people who are managing our events, who do request to have the event promoted on social media. I ask them to think about what is even worth talking about here, right? What is the story we're telling? Did somebody speak at the event that we can talk about? Like, people want to see people on social media. And all the things that you said, I was like, yes. When you were describing how you would go about promoting an event or promoting your presence at an event on social media, you really need to ultimately, I mean, this comes down to anything you post on social, but what is the story? Because that's not a story that you're going to have a booth at an event. The story is, we're going to be talking about how we're going to be making systems easier for AI companies, and here's how we're going to do it. And you have like 3 bullet points. Give me those bullet points and we can take it and run with it, but you got to give me something.
Gotta give me something. I think that should be the title of this whole thing for social media managers. You've got to give me something. We should get t-shirts with that on, I reckon. Like, because I know that everybody's going to be sitting here absolutely relating to this. And, you know, the events is one example that I often think is such a missed opportunity, given how much money gets poured into the actual trade show booth and all the travel and expenses that go with it. Like, I genuinely just want the clients that I work with to get even more out of that investment and see the ROI that businesses are looking for. And to go back to what you said before, the earlier that everyone gets together and works together, the better the outcome for everyone. The reason that I fell in love with LinkedIn back 10 years ago when I first started in sales, one of the big reasons was I would be the person that was in charge of manning those booths, right? So I was the salesperson, I was the account manager. My job was to stand there. And nobody comes to a booth because you've got free mints. Can I just put that out there? Like, you know, having a bowl of chocolates or mints is not a reason for people to come over, especially I'm an extrovert. Most people on the other side that buy from me, they were all introverts. And so what happened, Melissa, is that they would stay 3 meters away from the booth, squint their eyes to try and read what we had there, and then quickly scuttle along before anyone actually made eye contact and came over to talk to them. But what I discovered with LinkedIn was that if I just kept talking about stuff and what we did, and I would do that anyway, when we actually got time to having the booth, then I had a lineup. And I would have people specifically coming to me and saying, I saw your post and you were talking about this and I wanted to know more about it. And I'd be scratching my head going, when did I post about that? That was about 6 months ago. And we could have spoken before that, but it wasn't the right time. And so they would come to the booth and ask me about it. And so that's when I fell in love with it and realized this is a real opportunity to build community, establish me as the go-to person for these resources, and then have conversations with people, which is what the whole aim of social. Yes, lead gen is one small part of it, but it takes time, like you said. And it also, like, you have to earn that. And some of these conferences, like, they've got tens of thousands of booths out there. Be real. You need a reason, and it's not going to happen overnight. Should I stand down off my soapbox, or is there anything else you'd like to add to this?
What you said reminded me of this moment. This was when I was working freelance, and one of my clients was a point of sale technology company, and I was supporting their LinkedIn efforts. And I remember they had a booth at an event, and several people came up to them, the people who were at the booth, to tell them how much they loved their LinkedIn content and that they knew about them because of the LinkedIn content. And I felt like, hey, that's another example of a qualitative piece of, you know, a qualitative metric you can use to talk about the success for a social media program, is people actually recognizing the content that you're creating and coming to tell you about it, right? And that leads me to also think about a piece of the B2B social success for many companies that they're finding success in employee advocacy and thought leadership from your employees. As you posting regularly on LinkedIn, people recognize you and then wanted to come up to you at the booth and ask you about it. Similarly, that's what you should be encouraging your team members to be doing regularly as they represent your company on LinkedIn. That both drives, you know, personal brand for the employees. So it's when they ask what's in it for me, it's great for their own personal career, but it also reflects really well on the company too, and has this like halo effect. So I'm a big proponent of employee advocacy programs.
That is why we're here today, because I often talk about it's a company page led strategy scaled with employee advocacy. The two have to work together. Like everybody is on the same team. And I think that's possibly what the main message will come out of today's episode is if you want high performing corporate social on LinkedIn, this is not just the job of any one person in the business. It is about bringing everyone together. And speaking of bringing things together, now I only work in organic strategies. I don't touch LinkedIn page strategies, but I know you're a big fan of marrying organic and paid strategies together. Can you share us your approach to this and how can we make it successful? Because I'm imagining that a lot of listeners out there might have had their budgets reduced or have limited budgets that they need to be really careful about how they spend it. What's some advice that you could share today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a big proponent of using paid to support your organic initiatives. I think most people think of paid social, they think about lead generation almost exclusively. My take is if you're already investing the time, money, the energy into creating net new content, why aren't you doing everything in your power to amplify that as well? You wouldn't make a whole 30-second spot commercial only to not pay, media dollars to broadcast it, would you? Like as a traditional marketer, right? So why are we doing that with social? Why are we still just posting organically when we know that these platforms are being set up to be pay to play at this point? So, why are we expecting social media managers to do everything with zero budget? It doesn't make sense. I know.
Look, I
Especially at
wish I
this
had
point.
I wish I had the answer to that one because, we all know that organic LinkedIn for companies is almost at ground zero. So it really is. I agree with what you said there, that pay to play is a part of this. So getting it right is just crucial, and actually supporting the team that has to run this stuff so that they can achieve the goals that the business has. Yeah, it's just a big ditto from me.
It is. It's funny how you'll find in most marketing teams, there's plenty of budget to go around to support a lot of the other initiatives and other tactics, but there's not as much on the social media side. And we're seeing social media playing a bigger and bigger role in corporate strategy. So why are we not putting budget to it? So I can take this like a step further and talk about my approach personally from, for me and my team's goals and the corporate marketing goals being that more, as I mentioned earlier, like awareness and engagement and some other more intangible pieces to it. But to one of the ways that we've found a lot of success in this is that we have actual like a rep from LinkedIn that we are really closely connected with that help guide our LinkedIn paid strategies. This is not something that's necessarily available to everybody. The level of support we have is because of the level of budget that we do have transparently, but they do offer support. You're able to reach out through the LinkedIn ads manager to get at least some level of support. And then understanding deeply how the platform works. And I'm talking specifically about LinkedIn because that's where I'm personally focused on. And I would imagine most B2B brands are as well, right? But understanding how the platform works and what ad inventory is available to you is going to help you know what makes the most sense for you. For example, a lot of people don't know that LinkedIn now has what they call thought leadership ads. Like we mentioned earlier about having your executives and your employees posting content as like advocacy, you can even amplify their content. It's been found that people who post on LinkedIn get 8 times as much reach and engagement as brand posts. So what that tells us is that they're really leaning into the thought leadership side of content and encouraging brands to amplify that content. So understanding what your goals are, understanding who your target audience is on a really super detailed level is also very important because of the way that the LinkedIn targeting works. What I found to be the absolute best targeting opportunity across any channel, not even beyond social media. The ability to target people based on their company size, their title, their skills, like any of the kind of information that people are offering up on their LinkedIn profiles, you are able to target them by. So why wouldn't you take that organic content you're already creating and amplify it to the right people? And that's what we've been doing over the past year, and I've seen tremendous success from it.
Amazing. I think you've just inspired me and reminded me that I should get AJ Wilcox back on the show, and we'll dedicate a whole episode, listeners, to thought leader ads, because I think, as you shared, Melissa, this is a big deal on LinkedIn. I've watched and listened to lots of experts around the world, both those that, obviously run LinkedIn ads agency, and now coming from yourself, running them internally in your business. And they're just not going away. And there's nothing but good news that I've heard about it. So I appreciate you sharing some of that insight. I talk about the power of two. It is company brands and employee brands working together. And I think thought leader ads just wrap that up in a bow and say, here it is for those that have budget. But we're going to wrap this one up because there's one last question that I want to ask, which I think is maybe even the most important question, because when it comes to high performing corporate social on LinkedIn, that doesn't happen overnight. That is not something that you just got magically tapped with the corporate wand and ta-da, Melissa, you're now an expert. But what's one practical lesson that you've learned in corporate social that you wish you'd known earlier that maybe will help someone out there that's just starting out?
Absolutely. And I've done social in so many different spaces. This is really one of my first ventures in corporate, extremely corporate social. A lot of my past experiences have been in startups, have been freelancing with clients, and some of my clients were corporate. But what I've learned fairly recently since starting at WD is that things move a lot slower in the corporate world, which means you have to maybe work a little faster in your preparation for things. So by that, I mean, plan for the fact that everybody around you is not going to necessarily drop everything on a dime and do what you to support your initiatives. You really have to pull people in as early as possible and coordinate your calendar accordingly, knowing that everybody else has other goals and initiatives that they're working on. Unless you have your own set team and all they do is social media, the chances are that you are going to need to plan ahead if you're going to be going into corporate social.
Oh, look, those that are listening on the audio, you can't see me nodding my head and laughing and smiling, because I realize now that I don't work in a big global company like I did before I left, having my own business. How slowly things move is what used to drive me crazy. But funny enough, your advice to social media managers, get in early, get other people in early, is exactly the same as what we're asking of other teams that are working with the social team. The sooner that everyone gets together in the same room and plans this out, the more success that you're going to have. So, Melissa, thank you so much for sharing the actual secrets from someone that is working in a high-performing corporate social setting and getting those results on LinkedIn. I had a peek in your profile, over 83 million impressions that you generated, 30% growth. I'm going to share the details for your profile in the show notes. I recommend people go and follow your content. Why? Because it's fun and you'll enjoy it just as much. So thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. This was wonderful.
If you are a marketer that has been inspired by this and you're watching it over on YouTube, don't forget to leave us a comment. We'd love to get your feedback so that we know that these types of episodes are resonating with you out there. So until next week, everyone, cheers.